Good morning, everybody. It's Matt with REenergize. We are in southeast Fort Collins, Colorado, the best city in the state of Colorado, as far as I'm concerned. Pretty typical setup up there. This is a 8.8 kW 22 panel system we did a couple of years ago. So it's been working great. Had some grid-tied storage. So we had 10 kilowatt hours of battery attached to this system for time of use management. Customer was interested in expanding that system, and we provided a couple of options. So what have we got here? Here's something you will not see very often. So that is a Generac 24 kW Guardian model. And for anybody that's been in the solar world long enough, anytime you have a generator and solar together, that can cause some pretty serious problems because traditional grid-tied systems do not interact very well with generators. They can actually cause some serious problems. The generator can trick the system into turning on when it shouldn't in a grid outage, and that can cause some real problems. But this install is a little bit different. I would say less than 1% of solar systems have generator compatibility, and that's what we're going to look at today. We actually have an integration between a Generac system and an Enphase system. So I will take you around to the other side of the house. We'll look at some equipment. But before we do that, just to kind of talk through typically how these work. The generator connects to what's called an ATS, automatic transfer switch. And that senses for the grid. In the event the grid goes down, it disconnects the house from the grid and then starts the generator. That whole process takes a little bit of time, so the lights go out, the generator kicks on, and then the loads in the house come back on. It is a great long-term outage solution. And the generators have a ton of power. So 24 kW is massive. That is much larger in terms of power output than a typical battery system we would install. The challenges with an only generator approach is you really have no ability to do time of use management. And if you think about the fact that the grid is present 99.9% of the time, the generator really does nothing for that. It's adding no value. It's just sitting here waiting for an outage. So we'll talk about use cases and all that kind of good stuff here in a second. I'll walk you around. We'll look at some other equipment here on this install. All right, so here's a quick walkthrough of the service entrance on the outside of this house. So this is a traditional meter main combo. So we've got the utility coming up into the meter, and then that traditionally is first point of disconnecting means. So there's a main breaker in there. And then what we've done here is this is the existing 10 kilowatt hours of storage from the original install. This is the system expansion, so another 10 kilowatt hours. And these are Enphase 10T. It's a previous generation battery. Inside, underneath that cover, are 3.3 kWh batteries. And then the utility here requires a couple of disconnects. So we have the regular solar disconnect. So that will disconnect and isolate the panels on the roof. And then we also have a battery disconnect. So that is isolating the batteries from the system. These are utility requirements. This isn't a UL or a building department thing. And then one final switch, that is the master shutdown switch for the entire Enphase system. So that triggers a complete shutdown of the entire system right from one switch. And then what we've done here is we're grabbing, this is what's called a feed-through panel. So underneath that main disconnect, there's some feed-through lugs right here. We're grabbing those and intercepting as we like to call it. We're doing an intercept to bring in the system controller right in between the main panel inside the house and this meter main combo. So I'll take you in the garage and we'll kind of look at that as well. Okay, here we are in the garage. So this is the system controller, and this is doing a few things. This is the equivalent of the ATS, automatic transfer switch, or MID as they call it in the solar world. But the primary function of this piece of equipment is to provide a disconnecting means in the event of an outage. So this device is listening for the 240 volt, 60 hertz cycle. In the event that is lost, it will isolate the grid and run any resources it has behind it right from this panel. So the solar, the storage, and in this case the generator all interconnect right here into this panel. So we've got a series of breakers here. We've got our 40 amp breaker for the battery storage. We have the AC combiner, which is all of our micros up on the roof. And then we have the 80 amp breaker from the generator itself. And all those feed into there. This is pretty common. That's your Envoy, that all the panels up on the roof come down and connect and interconnect there. And then in terms of just a quick wiring diagram, this is kind of the magic here. We've got our units up on the roof. We come down into that combiner, which is right here. But this is actually your system controller. And again, what's unique about this install is your batteries, your solar on the roof, and your generator are all tied into this one piece of equipment. And that one piece of equipment is managing all of those resources. And that is very unique in the solar space, but also in the generator space. Very, very seldomly are all those kind of combined. So you have all the functionality of the generator, where long-term outage, large power spikes, you have all that functionality, but a short-term power outage, the batteries can step right in, the lights don't even flicker, and you have one system that manages everything. Okay, so we're here looking at that system controller, and we're actually with our client. Here's that app, and we're actually going to take this system off grid manually from the app, which is kind of cool. So we click a couple of things there, and in a second here we should actually hear the system controller click, and the house will be off grid.
I get a message that says it's taking longer than expected.
There it is. I just heard it click.
Okay.
So we're in the garage. There's a little bit of lighting, but the lights didn't even flicker. And again, that's one of the key differences between a generator and a system like this, is with the IQ8 system on the roof, those are actually grid forming microinverters. The same microinverters are in the batteries. So there's like a 5 millisecond cutover. So it's instantaneous backup. Take a look at that app again. So you can see right there, it is off grid. The generator is off. The batteries are sitting at 100%. So right now the house is being completely powered from the roof. Sun's out, and those resources, being the batteries and the generator, will step in only if needed. So a great solution versus just a generator only type of approach.